I've told this story before, but here goes. When I was a kid, my family and I went for a walk on the beach during midwinter because we're a little eccentric like that. Halfway through the walk, it started blizzarding fierce, and we decided to head back to the car. On the way back to the car park, my brothers and I were complaining of being tired, hungry, and thirsty. But my dad, who was born and raised in the area, assured us that there was nowhere to buy food and drink anywhere near that particular beach. However, as we battled through the whiteout towards the car park, a building loomed out of the blizzard. It was a strange building, like an annex to a 60s, 70s modern comprehensive school. People from the UK will know the style I mean, and squeezed in between four hedgerows atop the spine of a long, flat sand dune, as though it was there first, and the ancient and haggard hedges had somehow grown up around it. Outside was a sandwich board, advertising hot drinks and snacks, so we bundled on in. This place was packed. There must have been 4 or 5 dozen tables, and every single one was heaving with pensioners eating tea, toast, tea cakes, soup, etc. When we arrived, there were no other cars in the car park, and the nearest bus stop was in the village at the end of the track, a good few miles away, so goodness knows where all these old people had come from. The room itself was very strange. The tables and chair were all mismatched and arranged around glass display cases on podiums filled with moldering taxidermed specimens of local wildlife, except many of the examples were either creatures who live nowhere near the sea, hedgehogs, badgers, voles, or animals that aren't native or very rare to the area, cormorants, avocates, plovers, etc. At the center of the room was a squared-off spiral staircase leading to the upstairs, which, despite having no curtains visible from the outside and being in the middle of the day in a bright white snowstorm, was pitch dark. I mean, so black we couldn't even see the top of the staircase banisters. We sat down, and my dad went off to get us some food. The oddest thing is that even at that age, I remember looking at the prices on the wall and being very confused because they were all in old money, with prices in halfpennies, sixpence, shillings, etc. It was an open-pass kitchen, and all the equipment behind it looked very old or retro, I guess, as did the clothes of the very plump, happy woman working behind the counter. When my dad came back with the food, he couldn't stop talking about how amazingly cheap it was, and how the woman who served him spoke to him using ultra-specific regional dialect terms he thought had completely died out decades ago. He said it was like it being a schoolboy at the tuck shop again. We ate our very, very generous and delicious tea cakes and hot chocolate, got back into our coats, hats, scarves, and gloves, and walked out into the still raging blizzard. The whole time we were there, not a single other person entered or left, despite many tables clearly having finished eating before we even arrived. We battled back to the car, and with much difficulty, maneuvered it back onto the track to the main road and headed home. In the years to come, we visited that beach again many, many times. The building was not there. Not only was it not there, there were no signs it had ever been there. No rubble, no ruins, no footprints, no foundations. Not even the ancient-looking hedges that it had squeezed itself inside of. Due to the beach being on long promontory jutting out into the major shipping channel, the area has been fastidiously mapped for centuries. Using my student historical archive access, I studied maps of the area from roughly every decade, right back to the early 19th century, and according to them, there was never, ever a building on that site. Now, it's easy to think as I've grown older, I'd become confused as to which beach we visited, but my dad, who was born and raised there, knew exactly which beach we were on, and the beach itself is very, very distinctive. A very long, thin teardrop spit of span extending across the river estuary mouth. I know it must have been that beach because I remember seeing the red warning beacons at the top of the suspension bridge crossing the estuary, blinking through the blizzard. The place didn't exist. Had never existed. I ate tea cakes and drank hot chocolate with my family in a place that simply never was. I told this story before. When I was 25, I was driving home from the paint store and was waiting at the stoplight off the freeway exit ramp. While waiting, I heard brakes of a car screeching behind me. When I looked in my rearview mirror, I saw a car was about to hit my vehicle. The next thing I know, I'm outside of my SUV, and I see the paint extension pole that I had just purchased went right through my skull, blood brains on the windshield. I remember just looking at the wreck. I wasn't scared. I wasn't feeling anything. Then the next thing I remember, I'm sitting back inside of my car. Again, I hear the screeching brakes of a car behind me. Again, I look in the mirror and the car looks like it will hit mine. But the car moves to the left and passes by mine without hitting it. Went through the red light and manages to avoid crashing into anything. When the car passed me on the left, I swear the person in the passenger seat was looking at me with a look of surprise or horror. In my mind, I imagined they remembered or saw what I had. I remember sitting at the light for a few seconds thinking, what just happened? It was such an odd thing to witness or make up in my head. I had never had anything like that happen before. Then the light turned green, and I just drove myself home. It just so happened that this outing was the very first time I had ever left my baby. I just wanted to get home to her. There is a part of me that believes that my body may have had a different soul, and my soul is a walk-in. The accident was for the previous soul to experience the death, and my soul came into the body to live the rest of life in this body. From what I've been told, walk-ins do spend time with the previous soul so that they are familiar with the life, and the previous soul does not have to stay for a while, or can, to assist the new soul in the body, until integration. People who saw me after this did tell me how much I had changed. I had just got married and had a baby, so that changes a person too. But one odd thing was that my hair used to be dark, huge, and curly. Then after this, it started to straighten and turn gray. Well, this is my strange story. In April, I was in a traumatic rollover accident. I'm lucky I escaped without a scratch. It was the scariest thing to ever happen to me. However, when I went back to work immediately, which I shouldn't have, I was having what felt like timeline jumps. I felt like I was fighting to stay on my current timeline. I was losing moments of time here and there. One day, my coworker and I were merchandising and cleaning displays. We were literally talking to each other back and forth. I asked her a question, and it was silent. I thought, how rude. I looked around, and she was not there, even though we were in the middle of a conversation. So I thought, maybe she decided to take a break and go to the back room since she wasn't busy in the lobby or bent down behind the counters. I checked the bathroom, but it was empty. So I went back to doing what I was doing. Then 15 minutes went by, and she still wasn't in the room. So I shout her name as loud as I can, and then she's calmly like, I'm right here. Why are you yelling at me? I screamed because I was startled. I started having a panic attack and crying because she said she was talking with me and she had been in the room the whole entire time. I said that no, she wasn't. I told her I went to ask her a question, and she had just disappeared. I was so freaked. I felt insane, but she believed me. Update. I did have a concussion, but all my scans were clear and normal. I had CT and MRI. This only occurred in the first 3 weeks and hasn't happened since, so don't tell me to go to the hospital. But my coworker and I cannot explain this. She was my passenger in my car when the accident happened too. A week exactly before the accident, I talked to a different coworker who was witchy. I told her I thought the universe was about to rock my stuff, and not in a good way. Her partner came in the day of the accident, and when they left, they said they felt like they were going to be in a car accident and needed to drive carefully after interacting with me. My husband and I decided to stop at Hobby Lobby. It was kind of a spur-of-the-moment decision. Anyways, we're in the store, and we're browsing around, and we get to an aisle that we want to walk down, and there's what looks like to be a mother and daughter standing in the middle of the aisle. Truthfully, they didn't look like actual mother-daughter, but explaining it this way seems easier. The mom had bright pink hair, with another color. I think it was blue, and her hair was long. The little girl looks like she was just around 12 and wore a reddish pink dress, and I believe her hair was in a ponytail. So my hubby and I walk down the aisle that they were in, and they wouldn't budge. Like they clearly saw us with our cart and simply weren't moving. We just shrugged it off, and so we go to the next aisle. We're looking around for a few seconds, and here comes the mother-daughter pair into the aisle that we're in, except they aren't really trying to go around us, just kind of hanging out in the aisle. I got the sense they were trying to get us out of that aisle. Whatever. We leave the aisle and go to another part of the store. We're in another aisle again, and suddenly the woman kind of walks past our aisle, but also kind of pops her head in as if she's checking on us. I glare at her, and she looks slightly affronted, and maybe a tiny bit scared, so she doesn't go down our aisle. At this point, I'm getting annoyed by the situation, but I've also started to take notice. We wander the store for a while longer without running into them, until I see them again sort of rushing past us, as if not to make eye contact because they're embarrassed or something. I'm not thinking that much of it. The whole time we've been in the store, I haven't been doing super well. All I've had to eat up to this point is a big tub of popcorn, because we had gone to the movies before the Hobby Lobby was just down the road, and my stomach is not happy with me. We have a few items in our cart, but nothing we actually came in for. I tell my husband that I'm not doing really good and I want to go. He says okay, but suggests we put the items back since it didn't seem worth getting them anyways. I go put one item back while he puts the cart away, and that's when I see them again. The mother-daughter duo are rushing out of the store. They haven't purchased anything either. We walk out to our car, which is parked a little bit further from all the other cars. There was a ton of open parking spots at the front of the store, but we parked a little further out to try to walk off that popcorn. As we approach the car, I see that there is only one car parked directly next to ours, and the mother-daughter rush into their car and drive off with the mom looking back at me with a weird expression I couldn't place. And that's it. It was so weird. My hubby and I discussed how weird it was that we kept seeing them everywhere, but that they didn't buy anything in the store, and they left the same time that we did, and parked right next to us when there was plenty of open parking. The whole thing was super bizarre, but every time I think about it, for some reason, I am convinced that they were time travelers. I know that sounds crazy, but I don't know how else to describe the urgency in their actions to prevent us from just browsing. I also have no idea what they would have prevented if they were time travelers, but I just can't logically make sense of it. Anyways, that's my weird glitch in the Matrix story. In college, I had a roommate with a dog. One night, we smoked and my roomie was feeling too paranoid, so she asked me to join her and her dog on her nightly walk. We lived in dorms, so all the buildings looked exactly like each other. They were all side by side, with a big path in front of them for pedestrian access. We were walking down the path very slowly, since the dog was stopping often to sniff and do her business, so I took the liberty of being nosy and looking up into other people's windows. Each apartment had big floor-to-ceiling windows in the living room, and with the lights on inside, pretty much all of the common area was visible for anyone standing outside. I look into the only apartment with the lights on, and I just stare hard at the thing playing on their TV, the items on the table, the blankets thrown on the couch, and the people moving around the kitchen. Nothing special, just a college apartment on a COVID-era night. The doggy is done peeing, so we move on to the next building, which is about a 2-minute walk away. As we stop again, so doggy can restart her business, I look up to the apartment that also has its lights on to be nosy again. I started looking around and noticed how they were the same snacks laying on the table, the same thing playing on the TV, the same blankets, and exactly the same people doing the exact same thing in the kitchen. I freak out, but I think maybe we didn't walk, and in my intoxicated state I just thought we had. To confirm, I looked to the other buildings, and we had indeed moved, as the basketball court was now next to us, rather than a building away. I start panicking, and immediately try to tell my roommate about what I'm experiencing. Just before any words come out of my mouth, she tells me, "I see it too." We walk back to the previous building, and there was this apartment with the lights on. The exact same layout, items, and people. I literally dropped to my knees from the fear and confusion, and my roomie had to help me up. For some reason, she thought it was best to run back to our building, which should have gotten us back in less than 5 minutes. However, it felt like we were running infinitely, because we kept looking up to the buildings, and the same apartment was always in the building closest to us. My roomie yelled, "Stop doing this to us!" And finally we ended up running back to our own building. We go inside, and that is when our third roommate told us we had left for a very long time and was about to go look for us, but it felt like 10 minutes at most because we didn't even leave the surrounding buildings. We were daily and heavy weed users back then, but never to the point of hallucination. And I don't even think dispo pre-rolls could cause this. And we never felt anything to this degree again. My roomie was a heavy believer of the simulation and would be a constant topic in our apartment, both serious and jokingly. So, this experience felt like the universe telling us that it is present and to keep our mouths shut. I also wouldn't have been as freaked out if I'd been the only one seeing it. But the fact that she also experienced it too, without us exchanging a single word before our realization, is what makes me think about this moment a lot.